Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Microsoft Ignite. This is the Ask the Expert session with Veritas and Microsoft. We're very happy to have you here. Wanted to first just tell you what we're going to be doing today, going through our introductions and introducing you to our experts, trying to answer your big questions around migrating to the cloud. And so feel free to queue those up in the question and answer chat box, and we will get to those in just 15 short minutes. When you please use the Q&A to ask your questions, and you can post those and upvote them using the thumbs up. And myself will and my colleague Dave Little will try to get to those as fast as we can, and we'll post those back to our experts. The session will be recorded, and please adhere to the Microsoft Code of Conduct. And now we're going to begin digital transformation to the cloud. Are we there yet? And I'm going to turn it over to our first expert, David Totten.
Thank you very much, Carla. Appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this fantastic event on a wonderful week of Ignite, where we've announced so many really key product introductions. My name is David Todd, and I'm our Chief Technology Officer here in the United States subsidiary for our partner third-party applications. I get to work with partners all day long, taking the best and brightest of technologies that Microsoft has to offer, serving them up to greater scale and efficiency for our customers' use. And with that, I'm here to partner with Veritas. Let me introduce a couple of our Veritas presenters here. Rich.
Hello. I'm Rich Rose. I'm one of the senior architects here over at Veritas, and I'm the resident Aptar expert. And Joe D'Angelo.
Hey everybody, my name is Joe D'Angelo. I'm the distinguished engineer and practice lead for our availability solutions at Veritas, and just delighted to be joining everybody today.
Thank you very much, guys. So listen, let's start at the very top. When we think about digital transformation, what is it? What does it actually mean? You know, it's a very happy buzzword. We're seeing a lot of commentary around to really try and figure out what does it mean when we say, you know, how to transform and take advantage of internet technologies. Listen, digital transformation can be anything that you need it to be, but I want you to focus on the scale of taking advantage of enterprise infrastructure that you don't have to buy, you don't have to provision, you don't have to secure and set up. How do you take advantage of all the investments that have been made that are secure, scalable, and out for the best, latest and greatest technology on place? How do you take advantage of that in the marketplace without having to invest in that on your own? You know, most companies were thinking about, how do I get better, smarter, faster with IT investments? How do I get quicker and faster time to market while we're driving innovation with our product delivery? How do I reach more customers and drive a more seamless and loyal customer experience by leveraging our services or our products? We think you can take advantage of all these opportunities by leveraging the Microsoft Cloud, and so many customers have started that journey. But we really saw firm acceleration over the past year. The pandemic has taught us we need to do work and innovate how we do work and connect with our customers and partners in ways that we've never done before. The pandemic has accelerated this desire to do more from wherever you are in the world, from whatever place your data and your applications sit. And that's why Veritas is a perfect partner in this situation. If you think about all the checks and balances required with IT infrastructure and how to do more with less, Veritas gives us the simple tools to take technology to market faster so your people can focus on what they do best. So here's a good example of what digital transformation is. And I know the next question, well, now I think about what digital transformation is, but how much is it going to cost? And what are the steps required to get there? And for that, I'd like to introduce Rich for his section.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to try to share my screen out here. I'm going to actually go onto a live system and that's running Aptar. And let me know when you can see my screen here.
Looks good, Rich.
All right, great. So for those of you that are not familiar with Aptar IT Analytics, Aptar is an analytics platform that will gather data from typically, historically, customers' on-prem environments where we're collecting data from their storage arrays, we're collecting data from their SAN switches and their backup software, and we're able to put all of that information into a single pane of glass. With the advent of the cloud, we've also added the ability to collect directly from Azure and other cloud vendors. So we were able to give customers an entire overview of their entire infrastructure. And so one of the interesting kind of spin-offs of that is that as customers are migrating their workloads to the cloud, they're really challenged with it because they don't really understand the actual consumption, because the tools that they had to measure that were not very good. Those customers that had Aptar were able to do things like be able to look at their typical on-prem environment. And then the next question is, as these companies are being asked to move these workloads to the cloud, they are having challenges in doing so because they really don't have a really good understanding of what's out there. So what I'm looking at here is a typical on-prem VMware environment where we're looking at the VM guests and we can see how many vCPUs and how much memory are configured on each one of those. And typically when customers do this migration, they just go, all right, I got 16 CPUs and I got 16 gigs of RAM. I go to my Microsoft sizing tool, try to figure out which zone I'm in and what instance type would equate to that. And then you start your migration, which Joe will talk about the next phase. But so we are monitoring these on-prem environments, and this is what customers would typically use for their reports to view what kind of memory or CPU use was going on in their environments. Now, we took that another step, because as they're doing these cloud migrations, we said, well, how would this look then if we were to then take these statistics and move them to a cloud environment? So we've got reports now that will take that data that we've analyzed. And so here's a VM as an example that's got 16 vCPUs configured, and it's got 16 gigs of RAM. In Azure terminology, that would convert to a D5 V2 instance type. That system we've also calculated has been running for 682 hours. So this is something that even VMware can't really give you, is the amount of time that these are running. So we calculate the amount of time, we can calculate the instance type, and then based on the rates, we can determine that thing's going to cost this much if you were to lift it and shift it exactly as it was configured on-prem. Now, the interesting thing is that because we've been calculating and doing these meters, we look at the most that CPU is used. It had 16 vCPUs, but it's only used at peak over those 30 days, only about 3% of those. And in terms of memory, it's only used at most 27% of that memory. In fact, if we go back to that system, let's try to find it down here. It's right here. You can see this Service Lab 7. It's hardly used any CPU, except for maybe one day there was just a small amount that was being used. So what we determined was we don't really need 16 gigs of RAM, 16 CPU. Based on its actual utilization, we've calculated that would be requiring a D2 V2 instance type, which is only $190 a month. So we're able to take customers' huge environments, do this in literally just a couple of clicks away, and be able to help them right-size their journey to the cloud. And once they get to the cloud, there's obviously other reporting that we can produce within Aptar, so we can show you what your spend is across all of your different virtual machines. And we can also kind of meter the outcome as you start moving these workloads to the cloud. We can see the rate cards and everything. We can see on-prem versus guest utilization. And I have one other here. So as you start moving those workloads from the cloud to on-prem, you'll start seeing your on-prem numbers going down, and you'll start seeing your cloud numbers going up. And you can view them all in a single pane of glass. So how do you then, now that you've determined what hosts should be moved and what size they should be once they get there, how do you get them there? And I'm going to turn that over to Joe, and he's going to show you how you get there.
Thanks, Rich. Go ahead and get my screen shared here again. All right. So as Rich said, now that you've established what the footprint for the cloud is going to look like for you, and you're going to set up a more sort of cost-effective and right-sized approach, one of the questions that you have to ask yourself then is really, how do I get there? And really, how long is it going to take me to get there? And also, once you're there, how do I maintain certain levels of resiliency for those particular applications and services that you're moving to the cloud? So the technology that we see as being one of the most powerful enablers for this process is with Veritas InfoScale. Now, InfoScale is a combination of technologies that many of you might be familiar with and refer to as our storage foundation, Veritas Volume Manager, Veritas File System, and Veritas Cluster Server. It's a platform agnostic solution that addresses the needs of workloads both on Windows and Linux. So considering either of those, you can move those directly into Azure. From a storage standpoint, it does give you a lot of flexibility in terms of addressing different storage targets. So if you're thinking about moving a particular application, you can target the cloud on both on-prem as well as while you're in the cloud itself in Azure, utilizing all of the variety of storage technologies that you're afforded, right? One of the things that's so powerful about adopting a public cloud platform like Azure is the fact that you can choose multiple different storage targets and being able to do so sort of seamlessly without having to, readdress your application or recompile any of your applications. That's a powerful advantage that you get with InfoScale. Built into the technology as well is the ability to provide resiliency for those critical applications. So as you are considering, the SQL servers and the Oracles and all of the associated services and applications, all of those come out of the box, ready to go, being able to manage, replicated, provide that conduit both from on-prem into the cloud. And if the cloud target for you happens to be DR and not necessarily a migration, that's fine too. That use case is fully supported as well. So depending on what the sort of the pattern is or the manner in which you're going to utilize the cloud, the particular topology, all of those really can be enabled and executed using InfoScale. And it can, of course, be centrally managed, both your on-premises as well as cloud-based instances. Now, some of the things to consider when you're thinking about the sort of the necessities for a critical application or critical service. Obviously, we want to make sure that you can address the downtime associated with that. We don't want you to sacrifice any of the resiliency that you had on-prem when you move into the public cloud. If you're targeting a particular application, if you're targeting a granularity of an individual service or database or whatever particular workload, we want you to be able to maintain that. And that for us is basically looking at it from the perspective of a light switch. We want to make sure those lights are on or off. Same question you could ask yourself as you're sitting at home in your office. The lights, are they on or off in your office? It's not the only question though that you have to ask. For those applications as they move into the cloud, you have to make sure that they maintain a level of performance, right? You have to ensure that they can achieve the certain SLAs for all the data sets. That's why we think of it in terms of a dimmer switch, right? You ask yourself the question, are the lights in my office bright enough? Just because they're on doesn't mean they actually can do what they need to do, right? If I can't read the page that's in front of me. Same thing with your applications. Just because those applications are online doesn't mean that they are actually available. But that's not the only use case that we see as a critical need here, and that is as your architectures change and as you modernize your infrastructure, of course, sometimes you have to change the light bulb, right? But you don't want to have to shut off all the lights in your house in order to do it. And the same thing can be said with InfoScale. You can minimize and in some cases altogether eliminate downtime associated with those different transitions. So whether that's moving that workload from on-prem into the cloud or associating different storage targets or different regions or availability zones, depending on what the needs are of your application, all of that can be done very transparently. So let's talk a little bit about some of those use cases and really how we accelerate that process. As I said before, depending on what the use case is for your cloud journey, if it is disaster recovery, the great thing about our technology is because it's storage agnostic, you can absolutely target cloud-based resources, those SSDs and drive and blob-based storage resources in the cloud, the same way you could on premises with any SCSI device. We have a concept of what we call global clustering, this idea that you can actually bridge between different, not only on-premises physical assets, but then cloud-based resources as well. And in this case, it's a round-trip ticket, right? So if you move that workload there, in the case of DR, you can always bring it back on premises if necessary. But remember, all the while, those resources, those instances that you've spun up in the cloud will be right-sized. They will be very cost-effective based on the analysis that we provided through Aptar. Now, if your goal is to migrate into the public cloud and migrate into Azure so that now your workloads live and breathe and exist primarily in the cloud, we of course want to make sure that you maintain the levels of resilience that are necessary. Now, that could mean natively with Azure, or that could be with the AVS, the Azure VMware solution, either of which are supported. You have the ability to expand and create scale out clusters across both availability zones and if potentially across regions if necessary. So you can achieve the level of scale, you can achieve the level of resilience for those workloads. Again, irrespective of Windows or Linux, homegrown applications, off the shelf. You can run all sorts of different topologies to meet the needs and the scale required. So whether it's adding compute when you need compute or adding storage when you need storage, you can kind of scale those now in accordance with the demands of your applications. Now, it's also important to understand that once you've established that footprint in the cloud, having the ability to provide disaster recovery across regions. Utilizing a technology that we have in place called Volume Replicator, you can replicate between any particular region you want, or if you wanted to, you could even do it across availability zones. There's other options with availability zones as well, right? We can scale out applications using block storage with our technology that we call flexible storage sharing. But for the purposes of going between regions, our volume replicator and our global cluster concept or our global cluster feature does give you that capability. So again, if it's a homegrown application, if it's an off-the-shelf application, you can easily deploy those very rapidly. We have templates built into the marketplace that can help you to deploy these configurations, and really does give you the ability to sort of accelerate that journey. So once you've established what that footprint is going to look like, we can help, again, give you the path into the cloud and then provide all the necessary mechanisms for resiliency once you're there. So when you think about moving those applications, right, and moving those services, there's some things you just want to remember, know before you go. For those lift and shift type migrations, where you're literally taking a workload and repurposing it or relocating it into the public cloud, you want to make sure you understand what those uptime and SLA objectives are for those workloads and make sure that you can maintain those, right? Your end user, your customer isn't going to care that that workload is in the cloud. It's just that that individual is just going to care that they can transact whatever business with you. Of course, the consistency of management, right? We want to make sure there's some parity between what you've been doing on premises and what you do in the public cloud. Take advantage of all the components and capabilities there and services, but at the same time, provide a consistent experience so that ramp up time is much shorter. Of course, understanding the difference between instance level versus app level performance. As I said before, that whole idea of that dimmer switch. Well, what's performing? Is it the individual instance itself, or is my application that giving that level of granularity, right? That's a very important consideration when we talk about resilience in the cloud. And again, how long it will take. The idea of being able to replicate efficiently storage volumes from on-prem into the cloud so that you're not replicating any white space, right? If you've got a 5 terabyte volume, but only say 500 gigabytes of it is used, being able to only replicate the used blocks is a very efficient manner to move those workloads. And if it's really a concern, of course, replicating the entire instance versus replicating just the application, right? You have to do a little bit of a trade-off. We have technologies that can address both, but in this particular example, we're talking about just replicating those core components of the app itself. And then, of course, the architecture and topology options, right? Are you looking to scale up, scale out? Is it a DR? Is it in this case, because it's a migration, are you looking for DR in the cloud, or is it just a high availability within a particular region itself? And it's very important to know this is a one-way ticket, right? The idea of migrating a workload. But of course, disaster recovery to Azure, as I said before, that there's some considerations for that as well. Business priorities, you want to make sure that you take into account what are those critical applications and what are the interdependencies between those applications. What are the things you can do with InfoScale is establish the relationships between different workloads. It's so much more than moving a single application into the cloud. That isn't what's required, but rather an entire business service, as we like to call it. And looking at the relationship between those different applications that could span different on-premises, could be physical and virtual. Some could be in Windows, some could be on Linux. How do you then take that in totality and move that entire service in a way that you can manage it in the cloud in the same fashion? You can do that with InfoScale. And of course, your replication options, right? What are your RPO and RTO? Being able to establish those. You're looking for a synchronous model. You're looking for an asynchronous model. How quickly do you want to be able to recover those applications, and what tolerance for data loss do you have? As I mentioned, the multi-tier visibility, but also being able to test and validate all of these steps in advance. So whether it's a migration or whether it's a DR exercise, being able to non-disruptively test in the cloud so that you know that an application will behave or perform or simply will just seed properly once it's there. And the great thing about this is that with DR, it is a round trip ticket. So you effectively have an implicit support for migration if you're configuring disaster recovery, right? Because of all the same necessary components. But there is a use case that sort of rides the line between the two, and that's this concept of cloud bursting, where effectively you will have the opportunity on a sort of interim basis move workloads into the cloud and then move them back. It's the same process from a disaster recovery standpoint, but you're doing so in sort of in advance of a particular period of time where you would need some resources that you feel could scale easier in the cloud. Ultimately, all of this is achievable with the same technology that we've been, satisfying these on-premises needs for decades now, and certainly, really excited at how we've evolved this technology in a way that can adopt and really benefit those cloud resources. So with that being said, I believe we want to open it up for a little bit of Q&A. I'll turn it back over to Carla for that, and appreciate everyone taking the time to listen.
Well, thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. And we have been getting lots of great questions.
Awesome.
The first couple, I think, are to Rich. Does Aptar give a single pane of glass view into both on-premises and cloud resources?
Yes. I have some screenshots that I was showing of that, but we can actually show what your on-prem is right now, and we can also show the cloud, and not just simple stuff, but like I said, we're gathering the entire object model for the Azure instances, so we can see Azure backups. They'll be able to see all the instances, the rates and consumption and everything, all within Aptar.
That's great. And another question, if I wanted to migrate on-prem apps to Azure, can Aptar help with the cost consumption considerations prior to moving them? I think that was kind of what you were showing.
That's kind of what I was showing.
Elaborate further.
But there was another question that was around the disk, and I forgot to, we focus a lot on memory and CPU, but there's a huge requirement for the disk. And again, most of the on-prem environments, the VM team tends to be separate from the storage and backup team. So they don't really know what storage arrays might be consumed on the back end of from VMware. So Aptar will connect the dots. We'll be able to map the VM all the way down to the spindle that it's using, and we also are measuring its read and write IOPS. So as you're starting to move workloads to the cloud, we do that whole analysis, so we know that not only you're going to need this much memory in the CPU, but we also know that this thing is on, very high-speed flash disk, and it's doing a ton of I/O. That's going to help make your decision on what type of instances you're going to require for the cloud.
And to kind of follow up on that, Rich, one of the great things about InfoScale is that once you do move that workload to the cloud, you can dynamically move between different classes of storage, whether you're tiering between different object-based, blob-based, or SSD type devices, or simply just migrate those between different storage classes. You can do all of that non-disruptively, no outages are needed, and it's something that's very powerful. Sort of a time that you do feel that, oh, maybe I need to, step my game up a little bit and get even better performance, or potentially back it off if you realize it's no longer a requirement.
Yep, great point. It's good stuff.
Let me, bring up one more. So I think just this is a very basic question, but probably is one that occurs to everyone. But how do you get started? So I don't know, Rich, if you want to start that, and David, you chime in.
We've been, both Aptar and InfoScale have been around for a long time. So a lot of the customers that especially the large companies that are out there, they're already using Aptar, and if they're not using Aptar, this is one of the main use cases that they're doing, because they've been told by management that you're going to take a third of your environment and it's going to move to the cloud in the next 6 months. So we've been getting a lot of calls around that. So where do you get started with this? I would schedule a demo with us, or go onto our website, schedule a demo, and we can show you exactly how this would look in your environment and answer any questions that your storage, backup, and VM team would want to have. It's pretty simple deployment. It's not really, it's a fairly straightforward, fairly simple implementation. And even though it looks like it might be complex, it's quite easy to set up.
Yeah, let me add a little bit on that. From a Microsoft perspective, that's just it. Get started. Pick a workload, pick something like resiliency backup, data analytics, just understand what's happening in your IT environment and push that to the cloud. There's no need for you to custom code that. and deliver an on-premises solution in your infrastructure. Leverage a prepackaged product that's built using the best of Azure services to actually extenuate that value immediately to that. And the way that Veritas has set it up, it's an easy, take your data, take your environment, take the sign up, run a custom POC, and just see a demo and just see it in real time so you can actually understand how it will look. And then you can start thinking about how you manage that experience with your IT professionals in the future.
You know, Dave, it's amazing how much demystifying we have to do about what our solutions do for the cloud, because so many customers I talk to feel that there is some sort of like magic, some sort of incantations that have to be performed in order for these things to work appropriately in the cloud, when in reality they're designed to be easily transitioned from on-premises workloads into the public cloud, right? That provide that provide that parity, so that you have that confidence that that workload that was so critical to you in your brick and mortar data center will maintain that level of resilience and uptime, irrespective of how it gets configured in Azure.
Thank you, guys. And one more, are there any limits on how often we can back up Azure VMs or VMs on-prem?
Actually, Carla, can I speak to that just for a second?
Please.
In fact, one of the first questions was, how often does Azure back up your VMs? And I just wanted to make sure that that there was clarity in the fact that by default, none of the cloud providers back up the VMs. The cloud provider does a fantastic job of providing the resources, making sure that your VM is there and it's available, but they are not responsible for the data that sits in that VM. That is the user's responsibility. And even this idea of how often do I back up once a day like I used to do traditionally because I was using tape, that's no longer a requirement. So now you can actually tailor your data protection environment to what your requirements of your business are, what your recovery SLAs are. And so you can be much more prescriptive in how you're protecting the data. But just don't overlook the fact that the data protection requirement still belongs to the owner and user of the data. And Microsoft, while they do a fantastic job of providing everything that we need and all the resources, they are not protecting your data for you automatically.
Nor are they protecting the applications constituent in those instances, right, for those infrastructure as a service model. Hence why we're so keen on looking at it from the full spectrum of the services and applications that are the delivery vehicles, right, the consumers of those data sets that we're protecting. So being able to ensure the resiliency of both sides of that coin, and that's an important consideration as well.
Yeah, it's not a resiliency thing all the time either. It can be just something as simple as, somebody, you accidentally deleted your spreadsheet and you need to, and it's like you realize, well, even though the system is up and running and everything's fine, I don't have a backup of it. So you still got to think, just because it's in the cloud and it's in a very resilient place doesn't necessarily mean that, you're going to be able to recover something that got deleted.
A well-executed delete key is still one of the most challenging things to overcome in IT, regardless of where it's hosted.
Yeah, let me summarize this because I know we're at time. This is a perfect example. This one question seems simple. What are the limits on VM backup? I get this question all the time being a Microsoft CTO. Like, well, doesn't Microsoft do that? Doesn't Microsoft back up this stuff? Doesn't Microsoft have this analytics and the single pane of glass? We have a lot of tools, a lot of processes, but look at this specific example. In our tools, yes, we allow you the availability to back up VMs. We set a limit, 1 per day. Like we just heard from the Veritas team, there's so much more flexibility and granularity required for your data, for your applications, for your experiences, for that one person who just accidentally deletes the wrong user inbox. And that's why we have a better together story. You've got Microsoft as the fabric and the footprint of this mobile, scalable, secure cloud infrastructure. And then you build this real-time, deeper level of value with third-party products like Veritas to actually drive the real business outcomes you're trying to deliver on a day-to-day basis. And I think that sort of summarizes how we're a better together formation, Microsoft and Veritas, to drive your user needs.
Couldn't have said it better.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.